Good afternoon, Bob Jamieson here. I'm going to do a quick presentation on the policies of the newly formed Trumpet of Patriots party. Now, the reason being is I've recently been endorsed as the federal candidate for Barker, for the Trumpet of Patriots party. Now, I don't live in Barker, but I grew up in Barker, and the Trumpet of Patriots party asked me if I'd be happy to accept their endorsement as their candidate to run at the next election, which is on the 3rd of May, if I'd be happy to run as their candidate for the seat of Barker. And I was very happy to do so. Okay, so now I've sort of been doing quite a little bit of homework on what the Trumpet of Patriots are all about, particularly given that I'm going to run as a candidate for that party. I sort of wanted to know a little bit more about their policies. So what I did initially was to listen and take notes on the presentation that Clive Palmer recently did to the National Press Club. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is what Clive was in front of hundreds of reporters. Obviously, they're fairly alert people, and obviously Clive was keen to give an outline of the policies that he's going to be taking to the people at the next election. And so I listened to that presentation, I took notes, and also I've done a little bit of other research as well. So, okay, one of the opening comments that Clive made to the National Press Club was about what we've got as a democracy. Now, most of us sort of grew up, you know, like you'd vote for the Liberal Party and the Labor or the Labor Party or the Nationals or Greens or any of the major parties, and you know they. Particularly the two major parties, they were quite different in their approach. You know, we sort of grew up thinking, well, the Labor Party is sort of for the working class people and the Liberal Party is sort of for the business people. And my family were farming families, and we sort of, I was told as a boy, when you grow up, you vote for the Liberal Party because, Bob, they're the ones that are going to look after us. You know, they're sort of into private, and I suppose farming is very much private enterprise. Now, Clive said, well, we haven't got two parties. What we've got is a uni party. You know, there's not a hair's breadth of difference between, that's really not right. There are differences on minor issues. There's minor differences on some issues, is really probably the best way to put it. But on the critical issues that, you know, the Liberal Party about, the Labor Party, and you can add the Greens and the Nats as well, they're on board with the major issues. So it doesn't matter if you vote for those, you know, the uni parties, you're going to get the same outcome, whether you vote Liberal, Labor, National or Greens, right? And that's not really what a democracy is about. You know, Clive said, well, you know, we need alternatives. We need, you know, political parties that will go to the people with, you know, significant alternatives to what they are going to get if they keep on voting for the Liberals, Labor, Nationals, Greens. Okay. And now he talked about the misinformation bill, okay, and he said, look, if this thing goes through, you know, we're going to get prosecuted. We can be prosecuted for putting something up on social media that the government doesn't agree with. Now, this is an absolute disgrace. Clive, that was one of the major points that Clive addressed at his presentation to the press club, that, you know, this is, you know, Orwellian, you know, like this is, you know, New World Order, you know, like, yeah, you know, it's fairly obvious that there's a lot of stuff that go up on social media that is rather distasteful. But we don't want a government, particularly a government that's sort of given us 2 years, 3 years of mandatory vaccinations and lockdowns. We don't want them deciding what we can put up on social media, because they're going to kick off all the distasteful stuff, but they're going to kick off the stuff that is different, as I say, that doesn't agree with their policies, okay? And it's pretty important, given the situation that we've got at the moment, that that people that disagree with the government, that can get them off of this suicidal path that they're on at the moment. We want to hear those voices, and we don't want a government, saying, well, you can't hear that because it's not in agreement with government policies. That's absolute absurdity. Okay, now election funding. He talked about the fact that not this coming election, but the election after this next one, the major parties are going to get government funding. Taxpayer will be funding the major parties to a tune of $170 million. So, despite the fact that the Labor Party gets their funding from the unions, and the Liberal Party, they've got their billionaire supporters and things like that, they're going to pick up another $170 million of your money, taxpayers' money, and any new party won't get a single cent, right? So, democracy, sure, okay. Now, he talked about Donald Trump. Now, I've actually spoken to Nick Duffield, the guy that set up Trumpet of Patriots before it was taken over by Clive Palmer. And Nick was very, very keen to point out that it's not about Donald Trump. The trumpet is about the trumpet of freedom. The bands, the marching people. The trumpet is a symbol of our expression, our freedom. Clive has said that he wants to adopt the Donald Trump policies of drain the swamp. Which I think most of us agree with. But it's not really about Donald Trump. Some of the things that Donald Trump does, I think we'd all agree with it. But I certainly don't agree with some of his policies, that's for sure. But the Trumpet of Patriots is not about Donald Trump. The Trumpet of Patriots is about freedom. Now, so drain the swamp. Clive mentioned and got a bit of a laugh, and I don't know if that's really funny, but anyway, he pointed out that Elon Musk has saved a lot of money. He's, I was going to say billions, not quite sure of the exact amount, but he's cut a lot of government waste. And Clive pointed out that Musk found that United States government was paying pensions to people that are 150 years old. Could only happen in the government department, right? And if you sort of laugh about that, you'll have a think about the fact that our government departments probably can match that and even worse. Now career politicians. Like Clive mentioned the fact that he was a member of the House of Reps for a short period of time, and he said he didn't enjoy it very much because of the people. He said that the people that are in the House of Reps, he said most of them wouldn't get a job anywhere else. A lot of them haven't had another job, they'll get a job in a politician, be what we call staffers, So the politician goes out to his electorate and he'll put on a secretary or political advisor and things like that. They're called staffers, So that politician retires and bang, one of the staffers gets endorsed into his seat, or a neighbouring electorate, the electorate next door, that guy's retired or lost his seat, and so some insider that's never had a real job will be the next member for that seat. He said, why don't we have people that have had a real job? they're the ones that know what's happening out there. They're the ones that have got empathy with the truck driver or the farmer or the factory worker. Yeah, and but that's what our system needs. But unfortunately, it's not what's happening. I've got here that I've worked for government departments, and the worst two jobs I've ever had was working for government departments. And government departments are the ones that are least mindful of what happens out there. Like I was working as a teacher, and the teachers used to talk about this is what happens in the real world. Well, most of the teachers have gone from primary school to secondary school. They go to teachers' college and they go back to school, and they're talking about what happens in the real world. Well, they're teaching our future generations of people, and they don't know what happened in the real world. They were telling me, "Oh, Bob, this is what happens in the real world." I said, "Well, you may not know what happens in the real world, but I do. I've just retired from the real world after 60 years in the paid workforce and 25 different occupations. And so if I get elected, if I get elected to the House of Reps, well, no one's going to accuse me of not ever having a job. Like I didn't come through to the House of Representatives from being a staffer with a politician. Anyway, so let's have a look. Okay, Clive talked about homeless people, and can you believe that Australia's got 120,000 homeless people? Now that's an absolute disgrace. Absolute. I was shocked to hear that. Like I've travelled overseas and to the UK, and also a long time ago I travelled through the United States, and it was amazing how many people. This is back in the 1970s that you see sleeping in the street, and I'd never seen it. In the 1970s, I'd never seen anyone sleeping in the street. With a cup or a hat and asking for donations and things like that. Well, you see it now. But apparently there's 120,000 people homeless. And Albo gave $1 million to Food Bank Australia to try and feed those homeless people. And you might think, well, that's rather nice, and I suppose it's better than nothing. But Albo also gave $600 million to Papua New Guinea to help them field a rugby league team. So $600 million to Papua New Guinea to field a rugby league team, and the $1 million for Food Bank Australia to feed hungry Australians. Well, that sort of points to the sort of priorities that Albo's got. And the Labor Party, you think that the Labor Party would be the ones out in front, helping, the people in Australia that are sort of down on their luck. Now, getting on to another issue that Clive talked about, and this is rather important, the $5 trillion that Australia's got in superannuation funds. Now, a bit of a background here. You think, well, that's a lot of money, and Clive mentioned that it's the second largest super fund in the world. Now, given the fact that we're far from the second largest population, it's rather surprising that we've got the second largest superannuation fund. Well, that's probably because of a number of issues. Firstly, that everyone that's got a job, you've got to pay part of your money into superannuation, and the person that employs you has also got to pay a certain amount relative to what you earn into superannuation fund, and your contribution is tax deductible, and so is your employer, and the superannuation fund that is invested, and the proceeds of that fund go back into your superannuation fund tax free. So those superannuation funds are not taxed, okay, and as I say, they're mandatory. So we've got a lot of money in superannuation funds. that should be investing in our infrastructure, but unfortunately, most of it gets invested overseas. We've got Kevin Rudd in the United States. Kevin Rudd, being the Australian ambassador to the United States, is going around in the United States telling everyone, do you want some of our money that you can invest into your infrastructure? Well, Clive pointed out that our infrastructure is screaming out for investment. And we're sending off all our, not all of it, but most of our superannuation fund to be invested in the United States, the United Kingdom, Asia and places like that. When our industry is screaming out for capitalisation. And he mentioned, like I'm a South Australian, and we've had a lot of issues happening with the Whyalla Steelworks recently. And, Clive said, look, like he's into iron ore and things like that, and we are selling iron ore at $100 a tonne. He said that we should be, selling steel at $3,000 a tonne, but we haven't got efficient infrastructure that will turn the iron ore into steel. He said, Whyalla, they just should pull the whole thing down. It's all obsolete technology. It needs recapitalisation. And if it was recapitalised, we could efficiently turn iron ore into steel and be selling steel at $3,000 a tonne rather than iron ore at $100 a tonne. But that money isn't available, for our infrastructure. We've got Kevin Rudd and all the, superannuation fund managers trying to invest our superannuation overseas, which, this is just so stupid that it's hard to believe that it could actually happen, but unfortunately it does happen. We've got a $1 trillion debt, okay? Now that works out to be about $40,000 for every man, woman and child. Okay, now that was mentioned by Steve in the context of the tariff that he wants to put on mineral exports. Okay, so that iron ore that we sort of send off to China and buy back in motor cars and all the rest of it, he said that it wouldn't affect the marketability of our mineral exports if we whacked a 15% tariff on that. There's nowhere else that the Chinese are going to get it at a more competitive price, even with a 15% tariff on it. And that 15% tariff could pay off our $1 trillion debt. But that would be an intelligent thing to do, which means that it would be totally excluded as an option from the bozos that run our government. Okay. Now, I was going to talk about United States debt, but I'm going to skip that because Clive didn't mention it. Okay. In regard to the housing, Clive also mentioned that what he would like to happen is for the people that want to buy a house, okay, they can access that superannuation fund. Now, they can't access the superannuation fund if they want to buy a motor car or go for a trip or whatever, but if they want to buy a house and put money down as a deposit on a house, they should be allowed to access the superannuation fund. And then they can go to the bank and borrow the extra money to buy a house. And that extra money that they borrow from the bank should be capped at 3.5%. And this, he said, one, being able to borrow money from your superannuation, and two, being, which would help you get the deposit, help you get the funding by having a deposit, which is a bit of a problem for a lot of people at the moment, because the budget's so tight they just can't get the money together for a deposit. Well, if they can get the deposit from their superannuation fund, they can go to the bank and borrow the balance at 3.5, capped at 3.5% for home loans. Okay, well that would get a lot of people into the housing market, get them out of the rental market, and would help a lot of families become homeowners, right? we need to unite Australia. We need to be talking about things that are common to all of us, things that we agree on rather than things that divide us. Clive also said that governments sort of seem to be in the thinking mode of how do we fix this problem, okay? He says it's very, very unusual to come across a policy that is not designed to fix up something that's already failed. They don't sort of have the mindset of why don't we try something different, what is going to work, right? Rather than sort of just putting something into place that, it's going to, the wheels are going to fall off, 2-3 years down the track and it's going to need fixing. He said, we've got to have politicians that sort of think a different way and say, okay, look, maybe this hasn't been tried before, but, do your homework and think, okay, well, let's think outside the square and try and get policies in place that may not be tried before, but something that is likely to work rather than just, kicking the same can down the road from generation to generation to generation, and and be fixing up mistakes from previous generations rather than putting in place policies that will work, right? He talked about the voice, that, he flies around a lot, in Qantas, and every time you sit in the seat and your plane's taking off, you sort of get a welcome to country. He said, we don't need to be welcome to our own country. And why do we have the voice? Albo spent, hundreds of millions of dollars on this absolute ridiculous voice, right? Which is all about taking away our sovereignty. If we can convince people that we don't own the country, that we stole the country, and we murdered all these people, don't worry about the fact that all the things that we've done to help the Aboriginal. You can spend your whole bloody life, every second, every day for your whole life, trying to help the Aboriginal people, and all you get back is, oh, you stole our country, you've murdered our people, and right? We need to get away from that. We need to, all agree, doesn't matter, what's your ethnic background, whatever, that, we own our country. We've got sovereignty of our country, and that we've got to treat everyone equally, which, Clive put that very well, and I totally agree with him. Okay. I've got a bit here on the AUKUS agreement, which I'm not going to go into because Clive didn't mention it. This is about what Clive said to the press club, mandatory vaccination. He talked about mandatory vaccination, that he takes some credit for, his advertising and the investment that he put into making people aware of the fact that the vaccines were neither safe nor effective, and he was quite happy to tell us that there's over 5 million people, including myself, that didn't take the vaccine, and that, like I've got here, why was it? Was it that the big pharma made a lot of money? Did they want total control? Was it about depopulation? Was it about eugenics? Well, I've got my opinion on all of that, and I won't go into it quite at this point in time. But maybe, and again, I'm trying to sort of avoid things that Clive didn't talk about, but I will mention the fact that a lot of people say that it was, the deep state. They got their AI, and we're just a bunch of useless eaters, right? So we can get rid of all these people that we don't need, and maybe that was the reason for the mandatory vaccination. It's pretty hard to get your head around it, like if you sort of think about what happened over the last 2 or 3 years with these vaccinations, the lockdown, it's very hard to rationalise. It just, those other things like making a lot of money, well, if the people that are now told by their doctor that they need a vax, I think in the long term the pharmaceutical companies are going to lose business out of this, right? And total control didn't work very well in all those communist Eastern Bloc countries, did it? And do they really want AI robot serving their meals at their restaurant. It doesn't make any sense, right? Anyway, we will. That's for another day, okay? And it wasn't something that Clive talked about, but I couldn't resist. Okay, I'm going to talk to people about water desalination. South Australia's, well, people don't like me saying it, but a lot of people say it's the driest state and the driest continent, and we've now got another couple of 100,000 people. We nearly ran out of water at the millennium drought. South Australia was within a couple of weeks of having to cart water into the city, and thankfully the drought broke and it rained. Well, we're going to get more droughts. One thing you can be absolutely certain about, one thing that you don't ever have to doubt about in Australia, is that we're going to have more droughts, okay? And when we get the next drought, we're going to have an extra couple 100,000 people in Adelaide to provide water for. So my suggestion would be that we get on ASAP with whatever desalination projects are out there, and maybe a few others that aren't out there. But we need to be able to efficiently, economically desalinate seawater. We've got plenty of seawater out there, but if we don't do something about desalination, we're not going to have much drinking water come the next drought. Okay. Okay, a lot of people say politics is boring. Okay, well, vote for the Trumpet of Patriots party. Vote for Bob Jamieson in in the seat of Barker. I've been accused of a lot of things, but no one's ever told me I'm boring. Okay, if you want to know, try reading my books, and if after you read the Barley to Bairnsdale alignment book and you come back and tell me that I'm boring, well, you didn't digest it properly. Okay, we need to find those people. I'll finish with this. What we need to do, Trumpet of Patriots people, or anyone that's sort of mindful of the changes that we need. There's other independent parties as well. We need to go out and find those people that say, oh, I always vote Liberal or always vote Labor, right? So you find those people that tell you that they always vote Liberal or Labor and give them a good swift kick up the backside, okay? Right, because if people keep on voting for the same parties, they're going to, well, they can't expect a different result, can you? Because if you keep on voting in the same Liberal or Labor uni parties, you're going to get the same result. Okay, I'll finish on that, and thanks for listening to my presentation.